wears his Sunday best. Mother's tired, she needs a rest. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's sighing in her sleep. Brother's got a date to keep, he can't hang around. Io's house in the middle of our street. Io's house in the middle of our...
Isles House, big episode. Before we get into Lou Lamoriello, changing of the guard, we got to take care of the housekeeping. Follow us on Twitter. Follow the page at Isles House. Follow me at Ethan GSN, Jack at Isles Den, Rocco at Pizza Sports Guy. Follow super producer Greeny at egreenberg99 and producer and editor Tyler at Bars Down. Subscribe to the pod wherever you get your favorite podcasts, iTunes, Audio Boom, Google Play, Stitch Radio. We are on Spotify. Subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, rate us 5 stars, leave us a kind review. Gentlemen, a day that will live in infamy for New York Islanders fans. Lou Lamoriello out as general manager. Something that I would say a majority of fans were asking for and are happy about, including some on this podcast right here. Some less happy, Jack. But we will get into it. We'll give all of our thoughts. This is going to be more of a free-flowing episode. No Jackie recaps, no green room, maybe a little bit of insider hour just on things that we've heard over the last few days, today, so on and so forth. But I will throw it to my lovely co-hosts to kick us off. Jack, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I mean, there we were today. It was, I think, around like 2 p.m. Eastern, and the
I know
tweet
exactly the
gets
time. It was 2:38 because in typical insider fashion, I was busy between 2 and 3. The only hours of the day that I could not be glued to my phone almost combusts while I'm in the middle of an incredibly important meeting.
It was 2:22 p.m. by the way. The
2:22,
Islanders tweet.
sure.
2:22 on 4:22. Just saying.
2:22. Yep. Well, that's when we found out the news, and Ethan was busy in his meeting or something. Rocco was asleep during the big Nelson move. So
this has been revisionist history. Let's just talk about today, okay?
yeah,
Well, it's not revisionist. It's just, we're not revising the history. We're just stating what it was.
Yeah,
we're stating the facts.
We all have
so
our blunders, even Moses.
I guess I guess I'll miss out on the next one. But yeah, my initial reaction, for some reason, you could feel this coming in a way. You could also have seen it on the other side where he was going to meet with the press or something tomorrow. I don't know. My first reaction was shock.
Wow,
Yeah.
very profound, Jack. Rocco.
Yeah, so I don't know if I might be one of the only ones here, but I actually have the Isles notifications on.
You
So-
have to these days.
You have to. And I got the
Maybe not anymore.
notification, and it was one of those things like you knew it was real right off the bat because it comes right from the Islanders page. Honestly, and Ethan, you and I had personal conversations about this days and days and days. Like, I wasn't going to be convinced that it was going to happen until it happened. Like, I thought he was going to persuade his way back in. They were going to have a meeting with Malkin, and he was going to just find a way again. 9 lives Lou, just back in the fold. And they just dropped it on us. And honestly, the more time that passes throughout this day, the happier I am because it feels like our owner, who is kind of not always around, just kind of finally learned his lesson and realized we need to take a step back and really look at this team, and it needs a fresh set of eyes. So I respect Lou and his time here and a lot of what he did, but it's certainly time for a new vision as well. So overall, I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, very excited as well. One thing that I do regret about this debacle is, and Rocco knows this well, Jack probably knows this too, is just throughout, I would say from this past Friday, which I believe was the 18th onward, I sound like such an insider because this is stuff that my good friend Elliot Friedman says all the time. It's just, you can never be quite sure with Lou. And this is, again, it's just so silly to look at the events leading up to today because Friday night, 12:30 a.m., technically Saturday morning, like late, I had an hour-long call with someone who said everything without saying that they were hearing that they were going to move on from Lou. Effectively, that every single minority owner of the team was done. It was up to Malkin. They were pretty sure that he had been convinced. With all that being said, there were just mixed signals all over the place. There were reports that Lou had conducted exit interviews with the players. There were reports that the Palmieri deal and the Boquist deal were done. And if these are the deals being negotiated by the GM who's allegedly on his way out, sort of makes no sense. You know what I mean? What it boiled down to was what was starting to be reported over the last few days. It was everyone versus Malkin. Malkin holding on for dear life, skeptical of moving on, talking to some other potential candidates to see what else was out there, had heard that they weren't wowed by anyone that they had spoken with. And we can get into some of the more specifics later. And then they just dropped this bomb out of nowhere. Um, I know for a fact that the players were stunned. And I have even heard that something that we've spoken about ad nauseum for the entirety of the season was the rift between Wah and Lou and how they didn't see eye to eye, which sort of makes you question the coaching hire from a 10,000-foot view, right? Like, why is ownership going to approve and bring in Patrick Waugh if nothing that he wants to mold his team in is going to fit what the GM is doing? But I've heard that the players do not like Waugh. I think that you can look at that two ways. The most obvious and common way is that Waugh can be sort of a dick. I think the other way to look at it is that this has been a country club for a very long time. And I'm sure there are plenty of folks on the roster who are not used to and do not like being held accountable for poor play, which we've seen Patrick Waugh do a number of times throughout the course of the season. So the players not liking Waugh, Waugh not liking Lou, and vice versa. There's for certain going to be an evaluation period over the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long the GM search takes. But Patrick Waugh still has 2 more years left on his contract. So I don't think that that really factors into it. I think ownership would like Waugh to stay if the incoming GM is a fan. But I do expect that new GM to have final say. So Patrick Waugh, the entire coaching staff in limbo, the Palmieri contract in limbo, allegedly been signed from what I've heard, 2 year deal. No clue what that process is like, if it's with the league office, if ownership needs final sign off on it before it becomes official. Um, whether or not he's freaking out because he thought he had this deal in place and it may not be in place anymore, we'll just have to wait and see on that. So that's sort of what's been going on and things that I've heard over the last few days. And I will sort of cap off this little monologue with what I had tweeted out earlier, which was I was not the harshest Lou critic, although I thought it was time for him to go. I don't really think that it's debatable that Lou was a great general manager. He brought credibility to this joke of a franchise. He brought us the best or second best coach this franchise has seen. He helped bring a culture to the organization. He didn't rid it entirely of the country club mentality, but he brought a great culture to the team. Ownership, I think, has done overall a great job. Brand new arena, state of the art practice facility. And as loyal listener to the pod, Rocco Style pointed out, I believe presently the Islanders are the only vacant GM position in the league. So combine average GM tenure for New York Islanders GMs, brand new state of the art arena, great practice facility, proximity to the city, the schools, and all of that combined with the fact that it's the only vacant GM spot. The Islanders truly do have their pick of the litter. And with John Collins leading the search as opposed to Ledecky and Malkin, who are not necessarily hockey folks, John Collins is. I am optimistic that they're going to do their due diligence and they're going to get this right. And we can talk about the state of the team later on and what we project to happen and how far away we think they are, whether the new GM is just going to want to blow it up. But this new GM is walking into a great situation with some key franchise pieces, but there are some big decisions to make. But I am optimistic nonetheless.
You- I don't even know where to start with this. 2 months ago, the Islanders traded a rental piece in Brock Nelson for Colorado's best prospect, a first round pick, and maybe a third round pick. I can't remember off the top of my head, and they got that defenseman, but I just remember like the reaction from that trade and how it was such a great deal for the Islanders. I think that might have been the best trade any team made at the deadline,
It was.
in terms of the long term. So I've just never I don't think I've ever seen that before where a GM gets a complete haul, um and it's recognized like universally as such a great trade. And I don't know, it's tough. I find the timing to be tough because everybody begged Lou to sell. He sells knowing the team is going to get worse. The team gets worse, and when the team got worse, not many people can handle it. I don't know what the expectation was without Brock. Now listen, when your team loses 9-2 on home ice against the Rangers, when your playoff hopes were quote unquote alive, that's going to draw attention. And even the last game of the season, I didn't catch the whole game, but I think they were down like 5-0 in the second period. It just got ugly, and it got ugly quick. And yeah, this team just needed the offseason. And getting Cal Ritchie back for Nelson, I thought was really a great trade. And it gave me faith that he's still capable of making these great trades. I saw the vision. You get rid of the 34-year-old center and you replace him with the 20-year-old. You keep the vet wing around for a team friendly deal to help out when you have to move Barzell back to the center position. I actually saw a good vision moving forward, but at the end of the day, the noise just got so loud. And I think we have an ownership group that actually does listen to the fans, and they listened to the fans on this one. I think you had Ledecky subscribe to Isles Fix, who does great work. That caught me by attention. That caught my attention, and I think that that can't be understated of how much they're really listening. Um,
100%, Jack. I mean, just to reiterate, like it's very obvious that the Islanders media, PR, and even ownership did their due diligence on fan sentiment. I just want to rebut something real quick before I toss it to Rocco. Like you do have to keep in mind that Lou did offer Brock an extension. And on top of the fact that he offered the extension, he didn't move Palmieri for a second, and now we don't even know if Palmieri is going to be on this roster, and they could very well lose him for nothing if the contract is void and a new GM comes in and says, I don't want a 35-year-old winger on this roster moving forward. And Rocco even brought up the scoop that the Islanders were offered I don't want to say a distant future first, but like a 26, maybe a 27 first for a half retained Pajot. So like, yeah, it was a great trade. As we discussed ad nauseum, Brock Nelson was the number one target at the trade deadline, but I think intention matters a lot. And the fact that the contract extension was even offered in the first place for a guy who was on the hot seat, apparently, and other moves that weren't made. I'm not saying that he left the team in a bad spot necessarily, but there are a lot of what ifs in terms of assets the Islanders could have right now
I
with a
have a
GM
question
who
for
was then
you.
removed. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you guys think was like the final nail in the coffin here? Because I think it was a very fluid
Yeah,
situation
well,
up until today.
one thing that I missed in sort of going over the timeline on things that we heard, and Jack, great use of the word fluid. Kudos to you. The I again, I have it on pretty good word that Lou tried to fire Wah. And I think that that was the final nail in the coffin with Malkin. I really do. Malkin held on till the very end. I have it on good word that Lou tried to fire Wah. And I don't think that that sat well with ownership, given that that was going to be Lou's, that was his third head coach and was going to be moving on to a fourth head coach for a GM that old and a team that had that miserable of a season. I know that you brought up some of the games down the stretch without Brock Nelson and those being brutal losses. I think it might have been you. Someone was bringing up on the timeline a few weeks ago that, citing how the Rangers made drastic changes after Matt Martin beat the shit out of them in a rivalry game, and Dolan was just not a fan of that. I think you're absolutely correct in stating that this was a fluid situation. Like this was not a decision that was made lightly. This was not a decision that was made off of one game or one bad stretch. This was truly an organizational review of where's the team, what's the plan moving forward, how old is the general manager, and this guy now wants to fire the head coach that we all agreed to bring in. That is, there were a lot of pieces that went into this decision.
Do
And
you
also,
think? Oh, I'm sorry. I just had a follow-up question.
yeah, I just want to, and also,
Yeah, I want to let Rocco speak a
I
little
know
bit.
one person on Twitter was saying that this was, what did he say? That this was decided with a week left in the season or whatever else. That's
Yeah, it was David
Ethan and I
Clown
both
Nada.
have on good word that that's BS. I spoke to someone as of like midday yesterday. There was no true decision. So I truly
Correct.
think the final decision was today. Like perhaps there was a meeting between Malkin, Ledecky, Collins, and that's how it went down. But Greeny, what did you have to say quick?
Well, I just want to say, just real quick, Rocco.
Yeah.
This is the greatest day for David Pagnotta, who may now actually be able to get a source in the Islanders building.
Many people, not just David Pagnotta.
True.
Greeny?
But my follow-up question was, do you think this might have played out differently if Lou handled the trade deadline a little differently, if he committed to selling?
Yes.
And like if he sold to ownership, I got rid of Pajot for futures, I got rid of Palmieri for futures. We're all in on this kind of retool. I know he didn't like that word, but like basically if he proved to them that he was committed to actually redoing this the right way, do you think there would have been more leeway and he might still be here?
I think maybe, but I think first of all, that's opposite of what Lou has shown his entire tenure. And I think over the word I would describe that did him in overall is stubbornness, right? Like I wanted to resign Brock. I wanted to resign this guy. I didn't want to trade this guy. It's too much. Like you got to know when to cut the cord. And it's just like this constant refusal to either let guys walk or trade guys at the right time or giving guys that are bottom pair defensemen 7-year deals. There's just too much of, maybe for lack of a better term, but too much like I'm the smartest guy in the room and everyone else should just accept it type thing. And he's a legendary executive, Hall of Famer, did great by this franchise, but like my overall feeling is it's just time. It's one of those things. I know Greeny, you cited it probably a couple months ago now with Clutterbuck on Trotz that, the guys were tired of the detail. They were tired of playing defense a certain way. I think that happens with Lou too, right? When you're not winning, it's probably a little more annoying shaving every day when you're the hairiest man on earth like Kyle Palmieri. It's probably a little bit more annoying when, maybe you're buddies with a guy on Spit and Chicklets and you can't appear on their podcast. It's probably a little bit more annoying that you just can't, like the modern day professional athlete can't endorse himself in the way others are doing in 2025. So I think there's just these mounting frustrations that no one would say out loud because everyone had so much respect for Lou in a way. But it's this underlying feeling that has been there for probably longer than we realize.
Greeny, to answer your question, no, I don't think the trade deadline changes anything had he done it differently.
It's just not him to sell, right? It's just not him.
Right. My logic there being moving Brock Nelson, that's a shotgun blast to the chest for this organization. New York Islanders draft pick, homegrown guy, over 900 games played, back to back to back 30 goal scorer. Not like the face of the franchise, but a guy who's very well respected, been here his whole life, almost universally acknowledged as one of the most underrated players in the league, right? A guy like Palmieri, yeah, he's from Long Island, but he's not a lifer. He's played for a few different teams. Pajot, not a homegrown guy, neither of those guys are as high profile as Brock Nelson. And when you look towards the end of the season, when Scott Malkin is joining Lou Lamoriello on company-wide Zoom calls and effectively guaranteeing changes coming this offseason, specifically citing the defense, these are big changes, especially a lot of these guys also being homegrown. Scott Mayfield, Ryan Pellick, or Adam Pellick, Ryan Pullock, like these are guys who have been here forever for a very long time. And if you take him at his word, especially that the fact that Malkin was with him for these conversations, like let's just say, okay, at least one of those guys is going to be gone in the offseason. Like there was somewhat of a plan to do that retool, and people in the building seemed to be on board with that and acknowledging that it needed to happen. And even with that, even with trading Brock and acknowledging that you were going to at least attempt to move on from one or two of, the aforementioned defensemen, it still didn't matter at the end. Fans were fed up, the team declining year over year, a weak prospect pool. I mean, do you know how bad your AHL affiliate has to be to get a mention on NHL Network by Elliot Friedman? I mean, that is just almost unprecedented for them to be calling out.
Brian Boyle
Yeah.
brought it up.
Okay, yeah, Brian Boyle bringing up the fact that Bridgeport's a dumpster fire. Like, again, ownership can only take so much, and fans can only take so much, and the next couple years are going to be very, very telling in terms of how well or poorly Lou set this team up for success. Jack, I'll let you go ahead and answer.
Am I answering Greeny's question on the deadline?
Yes, if that changes anything.
Yeah. I think if he actually I think if he firmly picked a direction, I don't think there could be any dispute on how the team looked down the stretch. So I do think that changes things a little bit. And I think they're looking at an even higher draft pick. So I do think that he's probably still here. I think there's a lot of things that happened to lead to this that like aren't even being talked about enough. The hires, the John McClain sticking around all these years, his son in Bridgeport, those were two things that absolutely crushed him. And with the fans, like the lack of endorsement that the players can have and availability, and just like the very being very tight with the media, those are things that lost him the love from the fan base. And like those are three factors right there that I really think did him in. Also, the injuries that played a role in this season. Barzell played 30 games, and due to his hires, they had some of the worst special teams ever, I think, in NHL history. So, if they had a league average power play this year, who knows? But he had to hire his friend, and that's the stubbornness that Rocco was alluding to before. It just those are the things that I think really killed him here. So if he did pick a direction though, and really sold on a complete turnover of this roster, and they were picking top five, and they got Richie, like there was more vision to sell there. But he kind of went half in at the deadline because I think he thought part two was coming up now, and he's not going to see part two. And that's why I'm a little bit on pause at being excited for this, because a new GM coming in here in the middle of that plan, in which I went over before. Now you have three centers, you have a 20-year-old, you need to get wingers. And like, I think that Lou saw that, and he knew he had to get rid of some defensemen. I have no idea what the plan is going to be for a new GM in here, and a little nervous for a long rebuild.
Well, I think this may be a good time to transition, unless you guys had other thoughts. But
I had one more mini follow-up question to that. Do we think that if this team snuck in again as like the 8 seed, the second wild card, do we think he's still here?
Yes.
100%.
I don't think so.
I think so.
Really?
They're
That's
gonna get there,
crazy.
dude. You've been Jack. You watch more hockey than maybe anyone I know. The
Yeah.
Islanders are. You just cited like a bunch of embarrassing end of season losses. Whoever they played, they could play any single opponent that made the playoffs. They are getting swept and losing each game by an average of 5-1.
I
Like,
completely agree, but my thing is, if you were to make the playoffs after trading Brock, Barzell injured, a couple other guys banged up, whatever it was, like I think it would be the same song and dance where they're saying, oh well, if we had Barzell and if we had this one piece, and I think there would be a pretty good chance if they made the playoffs that
I mean,
he would
listen,
have gotten a
no one will
shot
know
because
for
they,
sure.
as we know, they were thinking about it even that when they missed by 10 or however many points they did. It was still in
Yeah,
the
I mean, no one, again, no one's gonna know for sure, right? This is all just our
no.
opinions. Again,
Yeah.
I can't stop thinking about them being ready to make significant changes on homegrown defensemen in the offseason. And it, again, like having that sort of retool, tear down plan, whatever you want to call it, just not being even a factor. And again, you get into the playoffs and you play fucking Washington in round one and you get demolished and you're getting the shit kicked out of you. It's still going to leave a sour taste in people's mouths regardless. But
So
it,
is it crazy to say that the Barzell injury sparked this entire domino effect of trading Brock, eventually the ousting of Lou? Like if Barzell's healthy, I tend to lean on
I would
Jack
argue
and
it's more
Rocco's side.
so I would argue it was more so the Metro being total dog shit because there's no arguing that. I mean, they missed by how many points? By a point, 2 points at the end of the day.
I
What
think it
was
was
it?
more than that. I think it was like four or
No, it was
five.
more.
I think it
It
was
Four or
like
got
four or
five.
ugly.
All
It,
right.
five.
it,
Yeah.
it got
There was
real
a couple
ugly.
teams
It got
yeah.
bad, sure, but a guy like Barzell definitely gives your team more versatility. And I mean, listen, I think if you have a healthy Barzell for 82 games, this team is eking in. But there's still no hiding the other deficiencies, right? Like they still didn't have assets to make an acquisition at the deadline to make the team better. The defense still stunk. Varlamov still got hurt. Sorokin wasn't good for a majority of the year. So I don't know. I mean, could things be different? You know, you guys seem to think I don't think so. Um, I sort of want to change direction slightly and piggyback off of how Jack finished his thoughts just now about sort of the direction of the team. And uh, another shout out to Style, who asked a very good question on Twitter this morning. Or maybe it wasn't Style, maybe it was Data Dom. I can't remember, but it was about whether or not like is the path to being a great team easier than the path to being a bad team. It was something
That's
along
Dom. That was Dom. He
those
put
lines.
it
All
was a
right.
poll, right?
Yeah, something like that.
It was
I'm
would you rather try and be a good team next year or try and be a bad team next year? And
right,
what he
right,
meant
right,
by that is trying to be a good team next year sort of worth sacrificing potential futures.
right. And we've spoken multiple times throughout the course of the season. Do we think that there's a path to being a legitimate contender next year? Do they need to take a gap year? I think seldom have we visited the scenario in which this is going to be like a multi-year thing. And I think it's very much related to the state of the team that Lou is leaving the next GM in, and also that next GM's evaluation of what's currently on the roster. And I have to be honest, the more I think about it, the less optimistic I am that this is a quick fix. And I'm happy to go through my reasoning and I'll try to make it as brief as possible. And I know that Jack is going to take a much more optimistic approach than I am because we've spoken about this before. So you're going to get certainly two different sides of the issue, and I'm happy to see where Rocco lands on it. But if you look at the roster for next year, you have pretty good center depth if you split up Bo and Barzell, right? Let's just say Barzell on line one, Horvat line two. You pencil in Cal Ritchie for line three, and then you have a couple different options, be it McLean or Cizikas for line four. Like that's depth that I think a majority of teams would sign up for. However, Barzell's coming off of injury. Horvat's another year older. Cal Ritchie, being a rookie center in the NHL is not an easy job. And I feel like we discount Pajot's contributions to this team. But does anyone realistically think that he's going to touch Pajot's point total for this year? And again, if we're penciling him in for a line three center role, that is going to be like, all right, you're up against some team's top players. Like it is, he's getting thrown into the deep end for a 21 year old. And I think a lot of people are discounting the learning curve that he's going to face. And it may be a couple years before he's like a really good center capable of maybe being a second line center and the Islanders having more roster flexibility. And on top of that, you have Anders Lee, who's going to be 36 years old in the final year of his deal, who you're going to be banking on his production not falling off a cliff, which we've seen 15,000 times from an Islander over the last 3 to 4 seasons. So you're banking on a 36-year-old to keep up the goal scoring production. Maybe you have Palmieri back. You got like Engvall penciled in for maybe a third line role, given his contract and maybe a new GM coming in and not sending him on the Bridgeport ferry every other month. But this team has no winger depth, no real scoring touch, like elite scoring touch, and you have a defense that's abysmal. What are they going to do with Noah Dobson's contract? Are they going to trade him for, picks? Are they going to trade him for a winger? Pullock's turned into a traffic cone. I don't think Pelech had a goal this year. I think Romanov is overrated. I think there were some stats posted today that show that pretty much every single defenseman on the team plays better defensive puck without him on their pairing. What are you going to do about Tony DeAngelo? He says he wants to be back. That's great. And yeah, he could provide an offensive spark. Varlamov, who has chronic knee issues coming back off of surgery, you're going to need him to split the load with Sorokin. There are just so many questions. And the path for this team to be good next year relies on an unprecedented amount of luck that I don't think any of us have seen cumulatively throughout our entire lifetime. They basically rests on future development of Yzerman and Danny Nelson and them turning into legitimate NHL players in 2 years. It rests on the GM, whoever it is, coming in and landing a Mitch Marner or maybe an Ehlers, which again, like these are low odds chances of happening. And there's no help coming in the system. There's no help offensively coming. There's no help defensively coming next year except for maybe Isaiah George, who you pencil him in for a bottom pair role. There is a very, very easy path for a grim 25-26 season. And I think a lot of people are maybe overlooking that in their analysis of the team because as we do, Islanders fans never project for regression from literally anybody. They just pencil in the same fucking stats for next year. And the defense is total dog shit. So, and not only is it dog shit, it's dog shit with a no move clause pretty much everywhere you look. So the GM that's coming in is going to have a hell of a job to do. And whoever it is, whether, I'm pro, anti, whatever it is, more than happy to give them a couple of years to figure it out. And I think we'll know what their direction is quite quickly based on their trades, their signings, so on and so forth. But like the path to being bad next year is far more likely than it is being good, in my opinion. I don't know who wants to go. I feel like Jack's going to take the more optimistic tone and
go ahead if
me.
you're ready. I'm ready, but go ahead.
That optimistic tone was under different eyes. I don't know anymore. I have a feeling I agree with you. Actually, I'm totally changing.
Wow.
I think Lou is the only GM out there that would have tried to be competitive and good next year. But I think a new GM is going to come in here, and I think there's going to be a lot of transactions, and I think a lot of players are going to be gone. I think players you expect to leave might stay, and players you think are staying are leaving. I think there's a 0% chance Tony DeAngelo comes back now. I think players that are controllable assets like Perunovic, Boquist, even though Boquist we've heard is probably signed already, like I think those guys are more likely to be signed than a guy like DeAngelo. I think is Gatcomb's contract up?
I think he's already
just like a small guy. It's not important. He's probably re-signed then, but I think Pajot is gone. I think Palmieri, if that contract is not done and it's not signed, I think he's gone also. I see there being significant turnover, and I see a GM that tries to build futures and has no interest in growing this overnight. One of the pros of taking this job that I think Ethan mentioned before, you're going to have tenure. You're going to have all the time in the world. Why
and all
would
the
they
money in the world.
rush? So why would a general manager rush this? Think about it from their shoes. Like they can just go in, they can make all the moves they want, And honestly, the moves they make are probably going to be popular within the fan base. Like, I think the fan base wants to get rid of JG Pajot. I don't think a majority of the fan base wants to resign Kyle Palmieri. I think they would like to trade a guy like Cizikas. He's an underrated trade person too. Like, you could easily get him off the books. He makes 2 million, 2.5 million a year. Cap's going up. There's
No
plenty of teams
protection.
that can use bottom sixers. Pellick, all of these guys are now like
Well, I'll add though,
very.
like with the defense, Pellick has a modified. I think he's gone.
I think so,
And
too, especially
and
now.
especially now, and the one guy I'll mention we've spoken about, Ryan Pulock, who's got a full no move. I mean, we might see Chris Drury levels of bullying to get him off the books. I mean,
But
we
it
talk about
also,
country club mentality and just no accountability for bad play for some players, or just no consistency from the coaching staff when it comes to holding players who are playing poorly accountable. Ryan Pulock was garbage all year, and then the second Brock was traded, he got the A. Like, what are we doing here? I feel like we could definitely see some of those guys being pushed out.
I
and
think
not,
too.
go ahead, Jack.
If I actually do think one of the things that happens now this offseason, just a prediction. I think Anders Lee is going to be traded before
Very,
next
very
season.
underrated trade
I could see
candidate.
that, Jack.
But again, if you're trading Anders Lee, you're very, very likely giving the C to Barzell. And you're talking about a GM coming in here and, going all in on the futures. That's hard to do when you've got a guy like Barzell, you got a guy like Horvat, and you've got a guy like Sorokin. Like, I do think that there is a path to rebuild on the fly here, which I know is a term that a lot of people hate. I think people would rather just be bad if you're going to be bad. But there is some talent on the roster. It's not barren. You know what I mean? They could definitely try their best to get rid of some of the dead weight on the defensive side, move out longer tenured guys, and take some swings in free agency. Or you never know like who the next GM is. Maybe they've got good connections around the league and, some guys become available that we don't know about or we're not expecting come free agency time or come draft time. There's just a lot that we don't know.
Yeah, and I think another point too is you probably want that financial flexibility to take, if someone becomes available, we see it every offseason with teams like Tampa, teams like Florida. They need to make their cap work. So if someone shakes loose off one of those teams, you can go and pick it up. One example I thought of was Sergachev last year. We remember when he got moved, just kind of like out of the blue, no one was expecting it. Tampa needed the cap room. They wanted to sign Gensel and make whatever other moves they did. It's just smart business. And I like a lot of the names Jack mentioned. I think Cizikas is a very, very underrated one because of the term remaining. I think teams would like him because if you're a playoff team, he could just jump on your fourth line. And I'm almost certain, Greeny, you could check this. I'm almost certain he has no trade protection left.
Cizikas?
Yeah, no,
I don't
think.
yeah, he doesn't.
Well, Greeny, you think Cizikas, no, but then you name other guys and you're like, oh wait, Mayfield does, Engvall, like a lot of them do. That's very surprising. So it's almost surprising to have a couple roster players left that don't have protection, honestly. And to Ethan's point earlier, like I got to be honest, it's going to be one of those things. Like if they're good, it just so happens to be that they were good. I don't think, not that they're not going to try to be good and be better, but you just have to kind of make these savvy moves. And if they work out, great. Capitals with Mangiapane is an example. Guys like that, like you could pick them up if you have the cap space, but it just becomes so hard because your total vision's about the future. And I thought it was another great point by Jack that if you're the GM and you're given time, why would you rush? Why would you force it? More opportunity for it to backfire, more opportunity for you to get canned earlier.
If you got time, use it.
Oh God. Yeah.
Oh man,
Please,
Walked right into that.
I never want to hear that again.
Walked right into that.
Speaking of GM quotes, by the way, Dubas gave an incredible one.
What
Yeah,
was it?
that was-
I
that
saw
was
it in
good.
passing.
It was shit in one hand, hope in the other, and see which one fills up quicker.
I know which one Dubas is, buddy. Like, of all people to say that, I think. Little sus.
Yeah. Yeah.
But-
But are we all good with this notion of them like taking a step back to take 3 steps forward?
I
there's
am.
one thing. There's one way they can be good next season. There's one thing
How?
in my sick mind that
How?
gives me hope for next
Josh
season.
Bailey returns.
No, but another favorite of mine will, and his name is Semyon Varlamov. If these goalies play like the $11 million that they are paid, I'm you can't really think that they're going to bottom out. So they can probably keep them in the race, but that's a big what if, and we'll need to see if Varlamov can even
Just
play.
for the record, Jack's hope for being good next season rests on the pads of a 37-year-old with chronic knee issues off of surgery. Just for the record, want that stated in as plain terms as possible.
It's
Ten
funny when
it
you
is,
put it
champ.
like that because it could be like we could literally be talking about Rick DiPietro then.
Yes, Jack.
Sure.
But
By the way, we're having all these conversations without any idea if Patrick Waugh is going to be coach next year.
or who the GM is, because who the GM is going to determine a lot too. Like if we get one of
Of
these
course, it's
old
gonna
school
determine
guys
everything.
that are almost a Lou type disciple, they're going to be going for it. You know, they're not going to wait too long. But and we've discussed this ad nauseum. I just cannot see someone looking at this roster with fresh eyes and thinking, yeah, I got to go for it. I just can't.
100%.
Like you look at the spreadsheet that Greeny put together the other day. I cannot see it. There's so many bad contracts. They're all old. And it's one thing to be bad, but it's even worse to be bad and old. Like they don't have that many young guys coming up. In my mind, to become good, you really have to nail some of these draft picks. There's existing ones like Iserman, Nelson. You sort of created one with Richie. They're the beginning of it. You need to hope you hit on this next draft pick, and then you need to build towards 2026 and hope you're a team on the rise, because I tweeted it and I truly feel this. I just want so bad a team to be proud of. Like they weren't the best team, but I think back to when they lost to Pittsburgh in 2013. That was a team to be proud of. They were scrappy, they were young, they were exciting. And I feel like if you had that sort of team now with the resources they have, with the arena, better owner, whatnot, you'd be able to build off it. The issue then was they had this team, but they were in this dump of an arena and they didn't have a ton of money and whatever else. Build me a team with a similar mojo to that and then keep building off it. Because
Well, Rocco, one team that you've cited a number of times that I think that could be a perfect model for the Islanders could be the Dallas Stars,
absolutely.
where
The
you
Jamie
have
Benn, the
Tyler-
Sagans, the
Tyler
big
Sagan,
contracts.
Barzell and Horvat.
Yes. And then
There you go.
you find your Wyatt Johnston. You find, I know they traded Stankoven, but that's the thing too. If you get some of these pieces and become good, you can then use them to go get stars. You
Sure.
create flexibility. That's what Dallas did. They had a couple bad years. And with their bad years, I believe they drafted Heiskanen. Maybe they had one other one where had a really high pick. I think they got Wyatt Johnston, like
Rope Hintz,
late
Stankoven.
first, Rupe Hintz. Yeah, they had a number of years where they weren't great. These guys stuck it out with them, and it happened to work. And now they're a wagon. And I think, like, if I was in the new GM shoes, the first thing I would do, establish my plan, and then I would want to sit down with the players. Someone like Barzell, someone like Horvat, someone like Sorokin. Listen, we don't expect to be good right away. If this is a huge problem for you, I may have to move you, because they have to understand that it might take some time. And I don't think we're going to see a Horvat, Barzell, Sorokin moved. I think that's going to become the core. But I do think as the new GM, you should have a conversation with these guys and say, hey, like it might take a little bit of time. And I know these are your prime years, but you signed here. And that's
Anders Lee needs to be moved.
I could see it. I could see
Needs to be.
I could see it both ways, because I could see the new GM coming in and saying, I want to sell high. It's time, and I'm not going to re-sign him. But I could also see the alternative where you're the new GM and you say, and I know this sounds country club, but
No, I get it. I know what you're going to say.
I don't want to ruffle that many feathers right away.
Sure.
I could see, and on the other end, you could wait for him till the deadline. Say you're bad. Like you have Anders Lee and you're bad.
You could, but you know what? I like a team like the Blackhawks, right? Connor Bedard is getting the shit beat out of him every night. They're lacking leadership. Is he a guy that you could ship there over the summer where it's like, give me some prospects. You got the leadership. If you want, you can re-sign them. Like, I don't know. I feel like you
I think
limit your
Chicago's gonna be
options at
looking
the
for more
deadline.
prime assets, though.
Maybe, but again, old GMs going with like a
Yeah.
more narrative-based trade,
Chicago's
team
by
that could
Notre
use
Dame. I get the whole.
sure, just a team that could use size and leadership and has a ton of NHL experience. I just think that if you're sort of limiting yourself at the deadline to only contenders who may not have the best picks, may not have the deepest prospect pools, where a team that tricks themselves into thinking, yeah, we just need leadership, or we're not that far out, we just need that type of player, they'd also be interested over the summer.
And you're also taking the risk if you hang on to him to the deadline that his
Yeah,
production
exactly.
falls off
No,
next year, he gets hurt, something like that
absolutely.
happens.
Absolutely. But the only, like, you just have to tread lightly, you know? You don't want to come in.
Rocco, I get your point, and
Yeah.
I go both ways. Like I
Yeah.
totally
I
understand
can
what you're
see both
talking about.
sides.
Yeah,
Because you
If you
don't want to have a Chris Drury situation right off the bat either.
correct. But you
Because
might have to because some of
you
these
might
guys are
have
gonna have to
to.
get bullied out.
You might have to, and it wouldn't hurt as much because you're the new GM. They know you're going to be here, and there's no reason for them to have loyalty to you. The issue with Drury was it was some of the contracts he gave out, and then he turned his
Right.
back on them. But at the same time, you just don't like it's human nature, you know? Like if your GM is just fucking over your friends and sending them to San Jose when they have a family, like it's a little bit harder to play for that guy. You know what I'm,
But this goes to sort of so like the players disliking Wah. Dude, something's got to give at some point. Like the country club is over. This is a new administration coming in. And again, I'm not like saying that I disagree with you or that you're wrong. I'm just trying to look at both sides of the
Yeah.
issue. With a new GM coming in, like it's over. It's over, dude. Like if he wants to go ahead and force out Ryan Pulock, and half the team is going to get butthurt about it. Like, what are we doing here? This is a business.
Yeah.
I sort of want to go as far as saying, if you're gonna cry and throw a fucking shit fit that a new GM comes in and moves Anders Lee, who's got a 16 team, I believe, and you're gonna throw a stink,
Yeah.
grow up. It's a business. This shit happens.
I just think because of Lee's tenure here, he's been here his whole career as the captain, whatever else. Maybe that's one of the guys you keep with the initial core, and you try to move these guys that have term left
Yeah, I would
something's got to
trade
give with
a
Lee
Bullock
either
trade
way.
for keeping Lee. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
If keeping Lee holds the locker room together as this GM trades Ryan Pellick, Adam Pellick, and forces out Ryan Bullock, okay, like that's a trade off that I'm comfortable with.
yeah. Go ahead, Granny. No, go.
No, I was like one last thing. I know Jack wants to talk about the whole Patrick Waugh thing, but I was thinking about this before. Like this, I think this first off season is the most pivotal of like the upcoming 3 or 4 for the near future. Because if you look at what this off season is like compared to 2018 when they brought in Lou for the first time, that roster at that point had zero accomplishments and was basically a bunch of young, unproven players. So it's pretty easy at that point for Lou to come in, add some, like tertiary guys like a Leo Komarov or a Valtteri Filppula and keep everyone together. Whereas now the new GM's coming in and you have guys that are older, over the hill. They've seemingly accomplished everything this group could accomplish. And like to what Ethan was saying before, a new GM's going to want his guys. I don't know if the players are really going to be throwing a shit fit over, well, you traded Anders Lee, you traded our captain. At some point, the players have to realize what their timeline actually is and what the organizational timeline is. So I agree with what you said initially of like you don't want to just trade everybody, but I do think that there's going to be a lot of trades that upset people or players in the organization, and they're just going to have to get over it because this is the offseason where I think the biggest change is going to occur.
I agree, and I think as far as who's moved, it could be as simple as who gets the best value back. That it could be as simple as that. Just a numbers game. Okay, this guy, we got offered a first for this guy and only a second for this guy. We're going with the first. Things like that. So a lot's going to happen. I think it's going to be a very, very active offseason. I just think there's going to be, there's going to be a bit of teardown. And like I said, you establish your core. Maybe you make it known around the league. These are our 3, 4, 5 guys. Don't even call on. Everyone else you could call.
And I think we'll know that direction pretty quick once the new GM is in here.
Yeah, because I mean, don't we usually see some moves during the playoffs? Like when many of the teams are eliminated, you start seeing salary dumps and things like that. Like it could start happening in 2, 3 weeks, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's more of like people getting qualifying offers, stuff like that. But you do see some of the little trades.
Yeah.
But I know Jack, you've been hanging on for a long time here about talking about Patrick Waugh. So the floor is yours, my friend. What are your thoughts?
We're good. We're good. But with Patrick Waugh, so you're going to have a new GM here, and this goes hand in hand with what I was mentioning with Anders Lee. I just don't see him staying. Like, it's not like he's done some great job here. The results have been pretty underwhelming. Who you want to blame for that, that's up to you. But you have a new coach, you have a new general manager coming in. Why would he want to keep somebody from this old regime that the last general manager wanted fired?
And maybe
Um,
Anders doesn't want to stay. Maybe he's going to look at the team and sit down with the GM and say, okay, we're a couple years away. I'm getting up there in age. Trade me while I've got value. That's a route.
how much do you think that Lou regrets his Patrick Waugh hire?
Well, I'm curious how much say ownership had versus Lou, to be honest, with all the strife
Wasn't
that
all
has
Lou,
gone
I
on
don't
this
think.
season.
Yeah, I mean the coaching hires after Trotz are another thing to mention um, as to why we're here right now. But yeah, with Wah, I just don't see him sticking around, and I don't really understand a case to keep him around. So it's just simple to me. In other sports, new GM comes in, they always clean house. No,
For the most part, yeah.
Usually.
so I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think that Wah's going to stay?
But what if the new GM likes Waugh?
He
Well, he's
probably
going to
will.
interview, correct? Like he's going to go through the interview process like other coaches would essentially.
Yeah, it's
That's
going to
what
be an
I got out of
evaluation
it.
process. It's not like they're
Yeah.
going to interview, multiple people and Wah. It's just going to be sit down with Wah and, all right, I like the guy, I don't like the guy. And if he doesn't like the guy, fired, and that's that.
I mean, I've said previously that if Wah had to be the sacrificial lamb for Lou to go, I would take it. So it is what I don't
Same.
dislike Wah.
One down.
New GM needs to pick his coach.
Yeah, he's got to.
Period.
It's got to be comfortable. You want them to be in lockstep. You want them to work together. You don't want to have these little high school tiffs that went on this year. It's just not good. Let him pick his guy. If it happens to be Wah, great. Like if we see a Bergevin, perhaps maybe it's Wah. Most other guys, I don't think it's going to be Wah. But it all depends. Maybe Wow's the new GM. Maybe he has years left on his deal, and if they bring in a rookie GM, they make it mandatory that he keeps him. We'll see what happens, honestly, because as Ethan said, I think he's got 2 years left, right, Ethan? So that's a thing too. You know, you're paying this guy. How many coaches are you going to pay at once? So I would
I do
right now.
find it
I'd probably say Waz not back.
I have to say, I just pulled up the Islanders website here. Chris Lamorello is listed here as the assistant general manager down there, but Lou is not listed. So they definitely updated this thing. McLean's still here and Abilene.
Yeah, well, until they officially announce it, I don't think you take it off usually.
He'll be the
But
new guy that kills
but
everybody.
the other thing too is the whole organization is littered with Lou's cronies. Like the whole Ethan, we've spoken about this. Like the front office is all just a couple Lou guys scattered around
And some Islander alumni who
that
are
just
in
have always been
positions that
there.
they just don't deserve.
Yeah. Not naming names, but a few of them. And just all Lou's guys. So there's going to be a lot of new names for those positions, including AHL, which they need, and basically everywhere else. But it's time.
So we're gonna get to questions real quick. Was one thing that Jack said. I do think the one scenario, Jack, where Wad does stay is if they get a young first-time general manager. I think they would lean on Wah because he probably is a little more familiar with the players that are here and the other staff members that are here. I don't know if that would obviously be a guarantee, but I think that's a scenario that would make sense. If it's a veteran guy, he knows a million different people, then I think Wah's gone. But I can see if it's a brand new GM, he has Wah stick it out for another year and then he goes and gets his guy once he's a little bit more familiar. But I guess we'll figure that out.
We'll see.
All right. Anything else before we go to questions, guys?
No.
All right. So let's pick a going. We got a ton of questions, some coming in before the news actually came out. So we can start first with Ryan Selliver. Ryan, it's at Ryan underscore Selliver. Have you guys heard any concrete names for a potential Lou replacement, or just any names in general?
I think most of them are out now, right?
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
we can say. I mean, right?
Bergevin, Yarmo, who I've mentioned a couple times on this podcast because at the more so at that time, it may still happen, but it always felt like if they were going to replace Lou, it would be with someone with experience. So Yarmo's definitely in there. Couple wild card candidates like Weeks,
Yep.
Ethan. Who else you got? Jeff Gordon. That's someone I kind of like, to be honest. Jeff Gordon. That
Same.
was with the Rangers. I actually think he did a really good job with the Rangers, and then he sort of got cut off when they fired him because they did that whole change of direction thing. I like him. And he's with Montreal now, and he's obviously done a good job. So that's someone that's interesting. People have mentioned Shanahan. What other names?
I mean, the guy I'd like them to look at, Ryan Hardy, who is not necessarily rumored to be in the mix or the hunt, but he's the GM of the Toronto Marlies, and he's done an excellent job at multiple stops that he's been at. Great eye for talent. So, maybe one of the lesser known names throwing that hat in the ring, but Rocco pretty much nailed all the others.
Oh, and Greeny, help me with pronunciation. The guy from Tampa, Matthew Darsh.
Matthew, yeah, Matthew Darsh is an interesting one. I also have up here Darren York, who is the Hurricanes assistant GM. He's run their player development and he's helped them draft, and they've been tremendous at drafting. That was another one, and then my guy that I keep saying is Rich Peverly. Those would be some of like the first time out of left field people.
Rich Peverly was on the Atlanta Thrashers. That's a former player, right?
Yes. And he's
What?
been, I believe his title is like for the Dallas Stars, their director of player development or pro scouting, one of the two. But Jim Nill, who's the Stars GM, loves Rich Peverly. That says that he has been super important.
So funny when the most random players end up being executives like that.
Yeah. It's crazy how this hockey world works.
It is.
All right, next question. We will go to Doc Vernold. He wants to know, was Wah part of this takedown of Lou, or was it done solely by ownership?
I think
Solely by ownership, but as I've stated, he was involved in a couple ways, given that Lou tried to get him fired.
yeah, and I mean I think we both mentioned this throughout the week, Ethan. Like John Collins was a very big part of this as well.
Yep.
We've been tweeting. We both mentioned it. Um, he's the head of PR. I think that's his title, right?
Couldn't tell
I
you.
think it was like
Yeah.
like head of business.
COO.
Yeah.
I don't think he's the COO, is he?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, his job is basically a lot to do with the PR of the team, correct?
He's their operating partner, is the official
Yeah,
title.
yeah. He's not COO.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't he own? Didn't he buy a bigger share recently?
Yeah,
Is
but
that
it's
him?
like I think it is, but it's like 1 or 2%, something like that.
Yeah. So
Yeah, minority owner.
I think in the position he's in, a guy that just is probably looking to promote the team, looking to maximize the organization. You could just imagine how sick he was of Lou. I mean, players can't grow beards, players can't go on podcasts, players can't promote themselves. A lot of these little things. I mean, we didn't even get player signs on the walk to UBS until this season, where you just have the player's name and number. Like that was a no-no from Lou before this season. So there's so many little things that may seem little, but in the grand scheme, they could really become issues. And again, if you're not winning, it just gets old fast.
Yep. All right. Next question, we will go to Dom at Golf Ops 1.
Data
Data
Dom.
Dom.
That is Data Dom. See, that's why I recognized it. Shout out Data Dom. All right. He wants to know, and I like this question a lot. He says, power rank the likelihood of these defensemen being traded in the offseason from most likely to least likely. Romanov, Dobson, Pellick, Pullock, and Mayfield?
Oof.
Most likely to least
Very good
likely.
question.
Pellick number one.
I'm gonna actually
Dobson.
go. I'm gonna actually go Mayfield number one.
Okay. Well,
Jack,
I'm gonna go.
number one.
my full list in
I
order.
agree with you. Mayfield, number one.
Pellick, Dobson, Pullock, Mayfield, Romanov.
Under a new GM, I'm gonna go Mayfield, Pellick because the no trade, Polak, Dobson, Romanov. And the reason I put Dobson lower is I think a new GM is going to want to keep a young defenseman, and he's not going to buy into the, oh, let's trade this guy for a win now piece like we know Lou looked at temporarily with an Elias Pettersson. I think the new GM is just going to end up signing Dobson. So that's why Dobson's towards the bottom. If it was Lou, Dobson might be one spot up.
One Mayfield, two Pellick, three Romanov, four Polak, five Dobson.
Three Romanov, surprising.
Wow.
I think
I
that
just don't see that one. I mean, personally, don't see him getting moved at all. But again, a new GM, you never know.
I think Romanov's going to ask for a lot of money, and I don't know if the new GM's going to give it to him.
That's fair.
You know who's also
Fair
going to ask for a
take.
lot of money? Noah Dobson.
Yeah.
I think the new GM is going to give it to him.
I disagree, but we'll see.
We will.
We
The
will
beauty
see.
of debate. The beauty of
Absolutely.
debate.
All right, a couple more here. We go to Joe Mama for the next one. Good friend of the pod, Joe Mama. Do the players that have a no trade / no movement clause have a greater chance to waive them now that Lou is gone?
I think yes.
Do you have any in
Yes.
particular that you think are more?
Why do I think that, or which
No,
player?
I'm saying, like, do you have one or two players that you think are now more likely?
Well, I think just as a whole, like you look at guys like that have full no trades or no moves or whatever they are in Pollock and Mayfield, a new GM could approach them and say, "Listen, you're not a part of my plan at all." Where Lou can't really say that because he gave out those deals. Whoever the new GM may be sits down in the meeting. He's like, "Listen, I respect you as a player. You've had a great career, but you're not really for us anymore." And that's where I think, guys have their pride. So if a new GM comes in and says that, you're probably going to want to go to a new team and prove them wrong. So I think guys like that could easily waive.
Jack, Ethan?
What was the question?
It was, do you think that any of the current players that have a no movement clause are now more likely to waive them now that Lou is gone?
Yes. Pullock.
I think all of them probably, just because they're going to see some other transactions happen. So I wouldn't rule anybody out.
All right. And we can end with the last one from Kevin Jacoby at Kev_Jacoby. Similar to one of the previous questions about the next GM, but I just want to get your guys' thoughts, and so does Kevin. Who is your top pick to replace Lou? If you got to pick the GM, who would you pick?
That's
I'll
hard.
go. I'd pick Kevin Weeks, as I tweeted before. Really simple reasoning. I think this team really needs so we're going from an 82-year-old who, I don't know, I think they just need some more life, some more energy into the franchise. Also, listening to Kevin Weeks when he calls a game, he's very aware of everything that's going on. And I was really impressed. The Islanders played at the Hurricanes early in the season. He was on the call and he knew a whole lot more about the Islanders than I expected him to. And all of the points he was making, all of his analysis, I thought it was pretty on point. So there's a level of trust there with his vision. And I also don't like hiring these GMs that have been unsuccessful in the past. I think you got to try something new. And I don't know if the ownership group is going to want to do that, but I don't know. You just staying status quo, hiring a guy like Bergevin or whoever else is out there, okay, you might be, they've built some decent teams over the years, but I just want someone unknown, someone young who's different. And I think it could be a big change.
I wouldn't mind Weeks. I mean, I think I'd give everyone a chance. I do tend to take your side, Jack, on the retread issue. And it's pretty apparent, especially given how long Malkin held on to Lou, that he wants someone who's been around the block and understands how to run an organization from top to bottom so he can go fuck off in London and not have to worry about it. So, in all likelihood, it'll probably be a guy with more experience, although I would be in favor of younger, unproven guys such as Weeks or maybe Ryan Hardy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my I don't think it'll happen because I don't know if he'll even leave, but ideally I'd like a Jeff Gorton. But one note here that I think we're overlooking a little bit too is Lou was president and GM. So I don't think it's entirely impossible. You bring someone in with experience to be president, and then you could hire
Great
a
point.
younger up and coming guy as the GM and they work together. Much like they do in Toronto, I believe. I think it's Shanahan and Tree Living. A bunch of other teams do that sort of thing. So I wouldn't overlook them potentially bringing in two guys to essentially run the team together.
Where you had the younger guy make the roster decisions, but you had the president kind of check him when necessary.
Yeah, like the president's involved in any which way and can kind of veto where he wants, but the GM does the day-to-day.
I can get on board with that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it seems to work elsewhere, so why not give it a try?
Absolutely. And I guess one quick question from me is, what's the timeline looking like? When do you think we'll find or we'll hear when the next GM is announced?
If I had to guess, and again, I'll check in on this and try to get some more information, but we're going to see a lot of names being thrown around the next few days. I would expect at earliest the next week. Could be 2, but we'll have to see.
And Ethan, don't you think with the widespread search they're about to put on, it could be the sort of thing where there's multiple rounds of interviews?
100%.
So it could take time, but at the same time, you probably don't want to wait that long because you have to prepare for the draft. You have to have your scouts ready. You have to have all these things. And as we said, the organization's littered with Lou guys. And if those guys are leaving, you then have to have other guys set. So I think it may be a couple weeks, but at the same time, I don't think we're going to be waiting around forever to hear either because the draft lottery is going to come. The actual draft's going to, like all these things are coming up and they have to prep for them. So you don't want to hire a guy a week or two before that. I think it'll be a couple weeks.
I guess Jack has no timeline.
This is Jack's flu game right now. He's done quite a good job, I will say.
Yeah. I'm being asked to predict the timeline of when this team's going to hire a general manager.
That is correct. You are.
I have no idea. But
Jack's acting like me during questions right now. Just like uninterested, asking
role
for a
reversal
repeat
tonight.
of the question.
Jack's answer is when Kevin Weeks is done calling games.
That's true. Yeah, at the conclusion of the playoffs. But probably, I think it's going to be a longer process than a week. I think it'll probably be 2 to 3 weeks. I just think like when you have a job, when you have owners that don't exactly want to participate in the day-to-day operations, they're going to need to find somebody that they could trust, and that's going to take a little bit.
And just remember that when Lou was hired originally, it was so close to the draft that he didn't make all of his front office changes until after, and he relied on Garth's guys to help him scout for that first draft, which of course ended up being a disaster. But just keep that in mind as we get closer.
All right, let's wrap it up. Thank you everyone for listening. Follow us on Twitter, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.
Father wears his Sunday best. Mother's tired, she needs a rest. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's sighing in her sleep. Brother's got a date to keep, he can't hang around. Io's house in the middle of our street. Io's house